People often assume narcissists look the same as they always have: loud, obvious, over the top, easy to spot once you know the signs. But the truth is, narcissists today don't operate the way they used to. They've adjusted. They've learned from the culture around them. And if you're still watching for the old red flags, you may miss the newer, quieter ways they manipulate and control. What's happening now isn't some calculated master plan where narcissists sit around studying psychology textbooks or plotting their next move. It's simpler and more dangerous than that. Narcissists are always testing. They push, observe what gets a reaction, and keep whatever works. When a tactic stops delivering results, they naturally discard it and try something else. That's how they've survived in a world where awareness about manipulation, gaslighting, and emotional abuse has grown louder than ever. Since the pandemic, nearly every part of our lives has moved online. Conversations that used to happen face-to-face now happen through screens. Relationships are maintained through posts, messages, reactions, and comments. And this shift has created the perfect environment for narcissistic behavior to evolve and hide in plain sight. Social media, in particular, has become an ideal stage. It allows someone to carefully control how they're seen while avoiding the discomfort of real-time accountability. Online, narcissists can curate an image with precision. They can choose which moments you see and which ones you never will. They can test boundaries subtly through timing, tone, and silence instead of confrontation. And this isn't limited to public figures or influencers with massive audiences. Narcissistic dynamics show up just as easily in small, private circles. It could be someone with thousands of followers, or it could be a relative who carefully manages a private account with a handful of chosen people. The scale is different, but the behavior is the same. On one end, you might see influencers constantly sharing dramatic updates, emotional confessions, or provocative posts designed to spark reactions. Likes, comments, and shares become fuel. On the other end, someone with a small audience might obsessively curate their inner circle, creating a sense of exclusivity or importance. Every post is designed to signal status, closeness, or moral superiority within that limited group. Whether the pond is huge or tiny, the goal remains the same: stay at the center of attention. The danger is that the more you're exposed to this kind of behavior, the more normal it starts to feel. Constant self-focus, emotional oversharing, and attention-seeking can blend into the background noise of everyday scrolling. Over time, you may even feel an unspoken pressure to engage, to like the post, to leave a comment, to respond quickly. That sense of obligation is not accidental. It's part of the dynamic. One way to interrupt this normalization is to pause and ask yourself a simple but powerful question. What story is this person trying to sell me about who they are? When you look at someone's online presence through that lens, patterns start to emerge. You begin to see whether their content is about connection or control, sharing or signaling, authenticity or performance. That awareness alone can help prevent you from absorbing manipulative behavior as just how things are now. By 2026, terms like narcissist and gaslighting have become part of everyday language. Awareness has exploded. Searches related to narcissism have surged over the past decade, and gaslighting became so widely discussed that it was named a word of the year after an unprecedented spike in interest. This growing literacy has helped countless people make sense of painful experiences that once left them confused and doubting themselves. But it has also created an unexpected side effect. When psychological terms become trendy, their meaning can get diluted. Labels are thrown around casually. People start using serious clinical language to describe everyday conflict, personality clashes, or moments of frustration. And in that noise, true patterns of abuse can become harder to recognize. Narcissists benefit from this confusion. They don't need to deny the existence of manipulation when they can simply hide behind the overuse of the language itself. As obvious behaviors like grandiose bragging or blatant gaslighting became easier to spot, narcissists naturally drifted towards subtler tactics. Instead of dominating the room, they might position themselves as misunderstood. Instead of overt control, they might lean into vulnerability. Instead of arrogance, they might use humility that subtly redirects praise back to them. These shifts don't make them safer, they make them harder to identify. Popular culture often portrays narcissists as exaggerated personalities or harmless attention seekers. That framing minimizes the real harm they cause. Narcissistic abuse isn't entertainment. It's a pattern of exploitation that preys on empathy, distorts reality, and leaves long-term emotional damage. When these terms are used carelessly, it doesn't just create confusion. For people who have lived through narcissistic abuse, it can feel invalidating or even re-traumatizing. Meanwhile, narcissists continue doing what they've always done. They blend in. They adapt to the environment. They hide in the chaos. And when someone gets labeled a narcissist, it's worth slowing down and grounding yourself instead of reacting emotionally. Ask yourself, who is making the claim and why? Is it coming from someone with first-hand experience, or from frustration, bias, or conflict? Then, reflect on your own interactions. Do you see repeated patterns of manipulation, control, and lack of empathy? Or do your experiences feel generally reciprocal and respectful? Finally, notice how the label affects you. Does it bring clarity and validation? Or does it leave you feeling more confused and unsettled? Labels can be helpful tools when they illuminate patterns and restore your sense of reality. But if a label creates more doubt, it's often more grounding to focus on observable behavior and its impact on you, rather than the name attached to it. At the same time, the broader cultural environment has shifted in ways that further empower narcissistic dynamics. Media ecosystems increasingly thrive on outrage. Headlines are designed to provoke emotional reactions. Social platforms reward content that divides, inflames, and polarizes. The result is a constant atmosphere of conflict, where everyone feels pushed to pick a side and defend it aggressively. This climate makes it easy to dehumanize anyone who disagrees with you. Words like toxic or narcissistic get weaponized against entire groups. Nuance disappears. Conversations turn into battles. And in that environment, narcissists flourish. They instinctively know how to exploit division. They position themselves as the righteous voice while framing others as the enemy. Whether it's in a group chat, a workplace discussion, or a family gathering, they use tension as leverage to control the narrative and keep people divided. It can be helpful to step back and notice how similar this dynamic feels to an individual narcissistic relationship. Just like a narcissist, outrage-driven media demands attention, thrives on emotional reactions, and constantly pushes boundaries to keep you engaged. Seeing that parallel doesn't mean disengaging from the world entirely. It means recognizing when you're being pulled into cycles that drain you rather than inform you. Another major shift that narcissists have exploited is the cultural emphasis on vulnerability and mental health. This shift has brought many positive changes. Conversations about emotional well-being are more open than ever. Seeking help is less stigmatized. Protecting vulnerable people is rightly valued. But as with any cultural shift rooted in empathy, it can be misused by those who lack genuine accountability. In this environment, narcissists often present themselves as perpetually struggling. There is always a crisis, always a new diagnosis, setback, or emergency. These disclosures aren't about healing or growth. They're about securing attention and avoiding responsibility. By positioning themselves as fragile or overwhelmed, they make it difficult for others to set boundaries without feeling heartless. Statements like, "You don't understand how hard this is for me," or "I thought you cared," are not spontaneous expressions of pain. They are carefully placed hooks. They shift the focus away from behavior and onto your reaction. They're designed to keep you emotionally invested and to discourage you from questioning the pattern. What makes this tactic especially effective today is that vulnerability is widely celebrated. Questioning someone's motives can feel cruel in a culture that encourages unconditional support. Narcissists rely on that discomfort. By appearing wounded, they disarm people who might otherwise notice inconsistencies or red flags. Compassion doesn't require self-abandonment. When someone shares their struggles, it's reasonable to offer empathy. But it's also important to check in with yourself. What do you realistically have the capacity to give? And is it your responsibility to solve this problem? Those questions help you stay grounded in your limits instead of being pulled into an endless cycle of caretaking. You can acknowledge someone's pain while redirecting responsibility back to them. Responses that express understanding without taking ownership of their situation maintain your boundaries. Over time, this balance reveals a lot. People who genuinely want support will respect your limits. Narcissists will push against them. Another area where narcissistic behavior has become more subtle is boundary testing around availability. In a world of instant messaging and remote work, the lines between personal time and professional time have blurred. Being reachable has become the default expectation. And that cultural shift gives narcissists new ways to encroach on your time and energy without appearing overtly demanding. Late-night texts, urgent emails, and constant check-ins are often framed as necessities rather than intrusions. If you don't respond quickly, you may be made to feel inconsiderate or selfish. Narcissists exploit this sensitivity around responsiveness, using guilt to erode boundaries little by little. This is especially noticeable in work environments where hybrid schedules make it easier to justify interruptions. It's also common in personal relationships, where constant communication is framed as care or concern. Over time, you may find yourself questioning whether your boundaries are unreasonable, when in reality, they're simply being challenged. One practical way to regain control is to introduce intentional pauses. You don't owe immediate access to anyone. Setting clear windows for communication protects your energy and creates space to respond thoughtfully rather than reactively. When you delay a response, you also gather information. Respectful people will wait. Manipulative ones will escalate. That escalation is revealing. It shows whether the urgency was real or manufactured. By holding your boundary, you protect not just your schedule, but your peace of mind. And that awareness is one of the strongest defenses against manipulation in an environment where narcissists have learned to adapt. When you begin to hold your boundaries consistently, something subtle but powerful happens. The relationship dynamic starts to shift. Not because you've argued better, explained yourself more clearly, or finally found the perfect wording, but because you've interrupted a pattern that once worked in the narcissist's favor. Boundaries don't provoke narcissistic behavior, they expose it. In a culture that glorifies constant accessibility, even small acts of self-protection can feel uncomfortable at first. Choosing not to respond right away, letting a message sit overnight, turning off notifications during your personal time. These actions are neutral and healthy, yet to a narcissist, they can feel deeply threatening. That's because access, not intimacy, is what reassures them. Immediate responsiveness signals influence. When that signal disappears, they often escalate. You may notice a shift in tone. Messages that were once casual suddenly sound wounded or accusatory. You might hear how stressed they are, how abandoned they feel, or how much they needed you right then. The urgency rarely matches reality. What's actually being threatened is their sense of control. Your boundary is reframed as harm you've caused them, and guilt becomes the tool to pull you back into compliance. This isn't about communication style or timing, it's about regulation. Narcissists regulate their self-worth through external responses. When you delay, disengage, or stay neutral, it disrupts that regulation. So they push harder, not because the situation demands it, but because their emotional supply has been interrupted. As communication norms continue to evolve, narcissistic tactics have become quieter and more pervasive. Instead of direct demands, you may encounter strategic silence. Messages left unanswered until you assert a need, followed by sudden warmth once the focus returns to them. This push and pull isn't random. It creates anxiety and keeps you monitoring the relationship, wondering where you stand. Silence becomes a weapon, not the healthy kind that creates space, but the kind that provokes insecurity. When you finally reach out, the imbalance resets. Attention flows back to them. Over time, this conditions you to stay emotionally alert, constantly adjusting your behavior to avoid withdrawal or tension. Another modern adaptation is the misuse of therapeutic language. As concepts like trauma, triggers, and boundaries have entered mainstream conversation, narcissists have learned to mimic the vocabulary of growth without practicing it. They may speak fluently about healing while using that language to avoid accountability. You might hear phrases like, "That's just my trauma response," or "I'm protecting my mental health," in moments where they're actually deflecting responsibility or shutting down legitimate concerns. Because the language sounds self-aware, it can feel wrong to question it. But real growth is consistent. It doesn't disappear the moment accountability is required. Healthy boundaries create clarity. Narcissistic boundaries create confusion. They're enforced selectively, applied one-sidedly, and often used to end conversations that threaten self-image. Over time, you may notice that your boundaries are negotiated, debated, or ignored, while theirs are treated as absolute. This imbalance slowly reshapes your behavior. You may stop bringing things up to avoid emotional fallout. You may minimize your needs or convince yourself that patience equals compassion. But patience without reciprocity eventually becomes self-erasure. Another red flag that has intensified in recent years is the use of constant crisis as a way to anchor attention. Some people genuinely experience difficult periods. Life is unpredictable. But narcissistic crises don't resolve. They recycle. When one problem fades, another takes its place. The specifics change, but the emotional demand remains. This keeps you emotionally tethered, always alert, always concerned. The relationship becomes organized around their instability. Your role quietly shifts from equal participant to emotional caretaker. And because there's always something urgent happening, there never seems to be a right time to address the pattern itself. What makes this especially difficult is the shame that can surface when you consider stepping back. You may fear being perceived as cold or abandoning someone in need. Narcissists rely on that fear. They know empathy keeps the cycle alive. But empathy without boundaries isn't kindness. It's vulnerability to exploitation. A grounding question to return to is whether support leads to growth. When you offer help, does it result in movement, insight, or change? Or does it simply reset the cycle? Over time, the answer becomes clear. Support that never leads to accountability isn't being used for healing, it's being used for control. As awareness increases, narcissists have also adapted by embedding themselves in collective identities. Instead of standing out as individuals, they align themselves with causes, movements, or moral narratives that grant instant credibility. This makes them harder to challenge without appearing insensitive or oppositional. When someone positions themselves as the representative of a cause, disagreement can be reframed as a personal attack. Accountability becomes persecution. Any concern about behavior is reframed as betrayal or intolerance. Sympathy is redirected back toward them, and the original issue disappears. In these moments, narcissists often present themselves as misunderstood or unfairly targeted. They emphasize how they've been hurt rather than examining the impact of their actions. The focus shifts from repair to image management. Another evolution is performative accountability. When confronted, narcissists may offer apologies that sound thoughtful but lack substance. They acknowledge feelings without addressing behavior. They promise growth without outlining change. Once the immediate pressure fades, the pattern resumes. Real accountability is uncomfortable. It requires consistency, humility, and follow-through. Narcissistic accountability is temporary. It exists to restore perception, not trust. If you find yourself repeatedly forgiving the same behavior after eloquent apologies, the pattern is giving you the truth. Prolonged exposure to these dynamics can distort your sense of reality. You may begin doubting your perceptions or questioning whether you're being unreasonable. This isn't weakness, it's the natural result of repeated emotional invalidation. One of the most powerful ways to regain clarity is to pay attention to how you feel after interactions. Do you feel grounded or depleted? Calm or anxious? Seen or invisible? Your nervous system often registers manipulation long before your mind finds language for it. Clarity rarely arrives all at once. It builds slowly through repetition. The same conversations looping, the same apologies repeating, the same exhaustion settling in. When awareness reaches that point, change becomes possible. Protecting yourself in this environment doesn't require becoming hardened or distrustful. It requires discernment, slowing down, watching behavior over time instead of reacting to intensity, letting consistency, not emotion, guide your trust. You are allowed to have boundaries without defending them. You are allowed to disengage from dynamics that drain you. You are allowed to prioritize your well-being, even when someone frames that choice as abandonment. Narcissists may continue to evolve. Their language may sound healthier. Their presentation may feel softer. Their tactics may become harder to name, but the core remains unchanged. A lack of genuine empathy, a need for control, a reliance on external validation. When you learn to recognize the pattern beneath the presentation, their power diminishes. Not because you confront them, but because you stop participating in the cycle. And that shift, quiet as it may be, is where real freedom begins. Over time, you begin to see where your energy goes, who respects your limits, and who only values you when you're available or useful. That awareness doesn't harden you. It grounds you. From that grounded place, you can build relationships rooted in mutual respect. Relationships where vulnerability is shared, not exploited. Where boundaries are honored, not tested. Where attention is offered freely, not demanded. This is how you protect yourself in a world where narcissists have adapted to the times. Not by memorizing labels or hunting for villains, but by trusting patterns, honoring your limits, and staying connected to your own experience. And if this resonates with you, don't stop here. If you want practical tools to spot manipulation early, protect your energy, and build boundaries that actually hold, there's more support available to you. Use the link below to receive a simple 3-minute empowerment plan each week, designed to keep you grounded, clear, and emotionally steady in real-life situations. And before you go, click the next video on your screen right now. It goes deeper into how narcissists test boundaries and exactly what to say when they do. This is where clarity turns into confidence. I'll see you there.